Hi everyone, my name is Margaret, and in this video I'm going to show you how to crochet the chain stitch and the single crochet stitch working back and forth in rows. I'm going to use for my supplies this yarn, which is a worsted weight, also known as a weight 4 or a medium weight tube yarn. So it's kind of like a t-shirt material that's a tube with a little bit of stuffing inside. Specifically, I'm using the one from the Loops and Threads brand from Michaels, and it's called Cuddlecraft Tube. You don't have to use this exact one, but generally it'll help if you're using a yarn that's more smooth and not fuzzy, like a chenille yarn or a mohair, if this is your first time crocheting. For my hook, I'm using this 5mm hook, also known as an H hook, or I think an 8 if you're using the Japanese system. The tag here suggests a 4.5mm, but I sized up a little bit just so it's a little bit easier to see slightly larger stitches. If you're using a different yarn, the label will probably also have a suggestion on what hook size to use with it, and you can go with that or go up like 1 or 2 sizes. That's usually okay as well. I'll also be using a little pair of scissors and a tapestry needle to show you how to finish your work at the end. And I also have 2 locking stitch markers. These are optional. I'll show you a way that you can use them to help you when you're counting. But if you don't have these, you can also use bobby pins or paper clips, or just skip that part. When you're crocheting, essentially what everything boils down to is that you're using your hook to pull new loops of yarn from the ball or cake that you're pulling from through other loops. And by connecting all of those loops, that's how you're building up the fabric. And all the different fancy stitches, it just boils down to making a new loop and pulling it through some other loops. But to get started, we need our very first loop, and for that, we're going to make a slip knot. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to make this. I'll show you one way. So for that, go ahead and pull out some yarn from the ball that you're working from. And then on a flat surface, take that tail and make a little loop like this. So it doesn't matter what direction your loop is going in, but the important thing is that the tail should be on top of where it's crossing, just like this. From there, you're going to pick up the loop, you're going to flip it over the tail so that it lands on this long end of the yarn, something like that. So you'll have a little pretzel shape. Then you're going to take one hand, you're going to reach into the loop to pick up that long end of the yarn. With your other hand, grab the tail and pull in opposite directions. So that will tighten the knot. And the reason we use this slip knot is because even when the knot itself is pretty snug, if you hold underneath the knot on the tail end here, you can pull on this long end of the yarn. So that's also called the working end. So the end that's attached to the ball as opposed to the tail end. So if you pull on that working end of the yarn, the loop should slide pretty easily and shrink up. If you want to make the loop bigger, you can pull on the loop itself, and you want to pull on the side that's attached to the working yarn, not the side that's attached to the tail, and you can make it bigger, and that should be pretty smooth. So that's our very first loop, and the hook is going to go into that loop. So it does matter which direction you put it in. So generally, when you're placing the hook into the loop, you want to make sure that the side of the loop that's attached to the working yarn, so here if I pull down, you can see that it's this side, you want that to be in the front of the hook. So go ahead, put your hook in the loop and give that working yarn a pull to tighten the loop so that there's not really any extra space around it and the hook itself. You don't want it to be so tight that you can't slide it like this, but generally you want to use the kind of circumference of your hook to create the evenly sized loops. So now that your hook is in the loop, you can go ahead and pick it up. And most people crochet with the hook in their dominant hand. So I usually hold it in my right hand, even though I'm actually left-handed. If you're watching the left-handed version of this video, I've just mirrored it in my editing software. So I can crochet with the hook in either hand, but I do tend to default to holding it in my right hand just because the vast majority of crochet tutorials, like instructional illustrations, all that sort of a thing, tend to only show right-handed instructions. So I just found it easier overall to figure out how to crochet right-handed rather than to mostly crochet left-handed. You can definitely do either. Just keep in mind that if you are a left-handed crocheter, that you might need to, like, either mentally or literally in an editing software or with a browser extension, flip any charts or videos you're following if you want it to show exactly what it will look like if you're crocheting with the hook in your left hand. But for either hand, there's two popular ways of holding a hook that you'll see. So what I use, it's referred to as the knife grip. So I have my thumb on the thumb rest, and I'll just hold it kind of like I'm using a knife to cut food. Another common way to hold the hook is called pencil grip. So you would hold it like you'd hold a pen or pencil. For that, instead of more of a pushing motion, a lot of people will crochet with what looks a little bit more like a scooping motion like this. Anything that's comfortable is fine. So go ahead and hold the hook in your dominant hand. Your other hand is going to be used to manage the yarn. So we're going to start off today by doing the chain stitch, but generally the sort of posture that your hands are going to be in will be the same or very similar no matter what stitch you're doing. So I would say when you're starting out, probably like 75% of your success, or just how easy it's going to be to actually make the stitches, is going to come from how you've set up your yarn tensioning hand. So I'll show you one way on how to hold it. Again, if you ask like 10 different people how they hold the hook in yarn, you might get 10 slightly different answers. This is just one way. So start out, hold the hook in your dominant hand. With your other hand, you want to grab the working end so that it goes into your palm like this, and you want the hook coming out from the top of your fist like this. And start pretty close to the hook like that. Don't hold it all the way out like this. So once you're like this, grabbing the yarn gently, go ahead and point your index finger on that hand. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bring the working yarn so that it goes up behind and down in front of your index finger. So like that. Or you can point your finger, bring your finger down in front of the yarn and up behind the yarn like this. So from here, you should have a little piece of the working yarn that's connected to the hook here. The point of doing all of this is to keep 1 or 2 inches of this working yarn straight. You don't want it to be pulled so tight that it's stretching, but you don't want it to be flopping around like this. So I'll show you one more time. So hold your hook in your dominant hand. With your other hand, grab the working yarn so that the hook is coming out from the top of your fist. Point your index finger, and then wrap the yarn around your index finger by bringing your index finger down in front of the working yarn and up behind so that the hook ends up in front of your hand like this. So from here, we're going to have to do a second thing with our yarn management hand. So we're going to anchor this loop right here. So we need to use a different finger than our index finger to do that. So go ahead and from here, touch your middle finger to your thumb. So these fingers are what you're going to use to gently pinch on the tail right underneath that slip knot so that your hands look something like this. So if I take this hook out here for a moment, I have my thumb and middle finger anchoring the yarn that's under the working loop. I have that working yarn going up and behind my index finger, and then the rest of it, I'm just gonna let it hang out there. I'm not really like pinching down on anything on this working yarn. The only thing I'm really holding still is right here under the working loop. So with the hook in, it'll look something like this. One common variation on this, if you do start to crochet this way and you find that this feels just a little bit too loose or insecure, is when you're wrapping the working yarn around, you can loop around one extra time like that. So you have this little extra loop, and that might feel more comfortable. Again, anything that achieves this result is fine. I have seen people who will do, for example, like this. They'll have the yarn going over their index finger, but the key thing is you need to use a different finger to tension this part of the yarn than whatever finger or fingers you're using to anchor the yarn here. So this would work as well because I'm using kind of my ring finger there to anchor, and my middle finger is what's kind of holding this piece of working yarn out. So this would also work because, again, different fingers are being used to hold this part of the yarn than the tensioned part up here. But I'm going to go with my usual way like this. From here, let's go ahead and make some chain stitches. So a chain stitch is just made up of one loop. So we're gonna make one new loop by doing a yarn over. So for that, go ahead and take the hook. You're gonna bring the hook so that it comes down in front of this working yarn, push it back, and then bring it up so it goes up behind the working yarn. So it should look like that. From here, you're going to take this new yarn, which will become your new loop, and you're going to scoop it through your original working loop here. So to do that, twist the hook so that the nose of it is facing the bottom of the loop. So you can see it's kind of a teardrop shape. It's pointy at the bottom. Angle the hook so that the pointy part of your hook matches that pointy part there, and then go ahead and steer that yarn through the loop. And as you're going through, you might find it helpful to change the angle so you're almost scooping it up in a way like this. And then as soon as the hook clears that loop, go ahead and slide it forward so that the loop goes onto the cylindrical, not the tapered part of the hook. And now you have one chain stitch and a new working loop. From here, the third step, which a lot of times you're not going to hear explicitly, but it is implied, is you want to reset your hands so that everything is nice and close again. So for that, let go of your thumb and middle finger and hold on to either the slip knot or the chain stitch that you just finished. So we'll just keep repeating that until we have a whole bunch of chain stitches, and that's what's going to become our first row of our little swatch. So again, the 3 steps are 1, yarn over. To do that, you're going to bring the hook down in front of the working yarn and up behind the working yarn. Step 2, you're going to pull up a loop, and you're going to do that by twisting the hook so that the pointy bit faces the bottom of the loop you're going through, and then go ahead and steer that yarn through the loop. As soon as you clear it, you can kind of twist it back so that the head is facing you. Slide that hook forwards to even out the size of the loop, and then step 3, you're going to reset. So you're going to let go and then move your kind of pinching fingers up. So let's do a couple more of those. So yarn over by going down in front of the working yarn and up behind it. Pull up a loop by twisting the hook so that the pointy part faces the bottom of the loop. Go ahead and steer or scoop that yarn through the loop. and slide the hook forwards so that you can even out the size like this. You don't want to leave it so that it's all just up here on the tapered end. It's going to get really tight. So you do want to slide it back up. And then step 3, you're going to let go and reset your hands. So if it feels a little bit too close to hold like right up there, you can also hold the one that's one below, that's fine. But even then, when you're doing that reset step, because you've made a new stitch, you do want to scoot those fingers up. So let's do a couple more a little faster. So we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and reset. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and reset. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and reset. So as you do that, you'll get a little tail here of all your chain stitches, and you can just let those hang out underneath the hook. You don't have to hold them as you're going. One other thing to keep in mind is with the fingers that you're using here to kind of anchor the loop, that's going to keep it from running around like this when you do that yarn over step, is you want to make sure that you're not pulling down on everything here, or you're not holding it down here and kind of exerting force to stretch it out. You're just holding it steady. So think of it like if you're holding up a little flower or something, you do need to pinch so that you don't drop the flower, but you're not tugging on it. If you're actively pulling on this part, it's going to tend to make your working loop very tight, which can make it more difficult to get that yarn through. So that is the chain stitch. Let's take a moment to look at the structure of our chain stitches. So go ahead, pull that working loop up a little larger and take your hook out. So you should see that on your chain, one side looks like a braid, and if you flip it over, it's a little bumpier and it looks more like your classic sort of chain link chain. This side that is more bumpy and looks like the chain links is referred to as the back side. The other side that looks like a braid is called the front side. When you're counting your chain stitches to see how many you have, go ahead and look at the front side, and all you need to know is that each of these letter V's that make up the braid, each V is one chain stitch. When we're counting our stitches, we don't count the working loop, so that's the one that's going to be still on the hook because it's not a finished stitch. So if I'm going to count how many I've got here, I can start down on this side. So this one here, that was my slip knot. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chain stitches, and then my working loop. If you're following along, feel free to make a whole bunch of chain stitches, kind of get comfortable with that movement. But when you're ready to keep going, you can pull back your chain stitches by pulling on the working loop if you have more than 11, so that you have the right number, or you can go ahead and pull out the whole thing and then make 11 fresh ones. So let me catch up to myself. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's do 3 more. 9, 10, 11. Okay, so this is going to be our foundation chain, also known as like the first row or row 0, depending on how you like to write your patterns. But this is going to be the very bottom of our little swatch, and we're going to build it up by adding single crochet stitches in a zigzag like this. So for our next row, we're going to make those single crochet stitches and attach them to the chains here. So you're going to start, you want to orient things so that if you have the hook in your dominant hand here, you're going to start by attaching them on this side closer to the hook, and then you're going to go towards the tail. So if the chain is now sideways like this, you'll see that the little V's are pointing this way in the direction that you're going. And for more terminology, there's 2 legs on each V. The leg that's further away from you is called the back loop, and the leg that's closer to you is called the front loop. So on, say, this one here, this is the back loop of this chain, this is the front loop of this chain. For this example, I'm going to be attaching my single crochet stitches just to the back loops of each chain. So that's going to be my attachment point. And then for the single crochet stitch, instead of each stitch being 1 loop, each stitch is going to be made up of 2 loops. So conceptually what we're doing is we're going to create 2 loops and then link them together in a way that they're attached to this previous row. When you're working in rows, there's this concept called the turning chain. So I've made 11 chain stitches here, but my sample is actually going to be 10 single crochet stitches across. This 11th one, or this like little extra one, is going to be the turning chain for my first row of single crochet stitches. So basically this guy is just going to hang out at the edge. It'll make it so that the hook has a little bit of extra height here when you're starting to make the stitch, and that's going to make your first stitch look slightly less squashed. So for our first stitch, let's go ahead and skip this first chain, find the second chain from the hook, and then find that back loop. So again, the side of the V that's further away from you. We're going to slide this onto our hook by inserting our hook into the middle of the chain and then pushing it out away from us so that this goes onto the hook. So for that, you can tension your yarn the same way that you were doing for the chain. And then I like to hold or pinch the chain stitch right in front or like below the one I'm going to poke into. And when you sort of stab into it, you want to stab in with the very tip top of the hook. You don't want to stab in with like the nose. So go ahead and insert the hook into the second chain. So it should look like this. You've got that original working loop and then your sort of skewered chain stitch. And then the one you skipped is just going to be hanging out there. So this is where we're going to be attaching our 2 loops. We've actually got one of the 2 loops we're going to use for that first stitch already. So that was this one. So to make our second loop, let's yarn over. So same as before, you're going to go down in front and up behind that working yarn. And let's pull up a loop just through the chain. So just through this top one of the 2 loops that are currently on the hook. So go ahead and pull or scoop that through. So now you've got 2 loops on your hook. So these are the 2 loops that are going to become our single crochet stitch. To join them together, we're going to do 1 more yarn over, and then we're going to pull this through both of the loops, and that's going to sort of zip them together. So again, you want to rotate or twist that hook so that the pointy bit is lined up with the bottom of the loops, and you're going to steer it through. If you're holding up here, you may find it easier to do this part if you hold kind of between the 2 loops like this. But go ahead and gently steer that through both the loops. So now you have 1 completed single crochet stitch. So it's probably going to look a little weird, like even when you've done it correctly, like at this point, it's not going to look very pretty. So that's normal. And at this point, if you've got your stitch markers, let's go ahead and put one into the top of our first single crochet stitch. So again, each single crochet stitch is made up of 2 loops. So you'll have one on the side. So that's the one that's like grabbing onto the attachment point. And then you have the loop that's on the top. So we're going to insert that stitch marker into the top loop here. So for that, if you take the hook out, you'll have that working loop and it's going to be sort of sprouting out from a V. And that's where you want to slide your stitch marker into like that. So it's just on the top, and go ahead and close that up. So the reason I'm doing this is once you've gone and made your whole row here, if you're going back to count, if you're still not super fluent in what all the stitches look like, sometimes it can be difficult to tell where your first stitch was versus perhaps the foundation chain, or if you made this kind of tight, sometimes you might think this is the foundation chain and so on. So this will just help us when we're counting, as well as when we're making our next row. We'll know where to put our last stitch. So let's keep going. Again, when you insert the hook back into the working loop, you want to make sure that the side of the yarn that's attached to the working yarn is in front like this. So go ahead and tighten that up if you need to by pulling the working yarn. And let's make our next single crochet stitch. So we are now past that turning chain. So the next place we're going to put it is just whichever chain stitch is right after all of this stuff. So in my case, that's going to be this chain right here. There's kind of a hole here because it's expanded when we've shoved all those extra loops in. But again, this stitch we've just completed, it's already kind of grabbing onto this. So you know this chain already has a stitch attached. And then the one right after it, right here, is where I'm going to insert the hook. So again, I'll tension my yarn. I'm going to hold the chain that's right below the one I'm going to stab into. So I'm going to stab into here, and I'm going to use that very top of the hook to slide through so that that back half of the V is on the hook. From here, I'm going to do a yarn over, so down in front, up behind, and I'm going to pull up a loop just through that chain stitch. So I'm not going through both, I'm just going through that top one there. So like this. So now I have the 2 loops. These are the 2 loops that are going to become my next single crochet stitch. I'm going to now yarn over one more time, and then I'm going to steer or scoop that little piece of yarn through both of these loops to sort of zip them together. So pull through the 2 loops. So now that's my second single crochet stitch. Let's do the next one. So again, when you're figuring out where to stick your hook, you're gonna look for the V's. Sometimes it's easier if you start from the far end rather than trying to figure it out right up here. So if you're doing that, you can pick one you're like, okay, I know that's a V, that's a V, that's a V, and I think that's a V. But once you've got here, the next one has all this stuff already attached to it. So even though there's kind of a gap there, we'll know that it's actually this stitch right here that we want to work into. So I'm going to hold right in front of there. I'm going to slide the hook in. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull up that second loop, going to yarn over again and pull that through both of the loops. So that's single crochet stitch number 3. So at this point, kind of looks like this. If you've gotten to a point where you're like, I don't know which way is up anymore, what you can do is pull that working loop up just so you don't lose it, and put your work down on a flat surface. And if you've put in that stitch marker, you can use that to remember, okay, that was on the side that I was holding the hook on. So it should go over here. And the tail should be on the other side. And then you can flatten that out. And what you can do is you can take that working loop and you're going to pull it in the opposite direction from the beginning of your row like this. So that should kind of square it up. And you should hopefully be able to see this top edge of your stitches. It looks kind of like that chain that you made at the beginning. And then this down here will be the chain that you're working into. So once you have it squared up, you can reinsert the hook and pick everything up again and keep going. So from here, our next chain stitch is going to be this one right here. So I'm going to insert the hook, yarn over. And one thing you want to note is that this yarn over here, I don't need to have a full like 360-degree twist like this every time. If anything, if you've got two kind of diagonals or two loops before you do that pull through, you're going to end up with excess yarn in your loop. So just make sure you do down in front and up behind. As long as you've got enough yarn there that you can kind of scoop it like this, that's all you need. You don't need that second wrap like that. So we've inserted our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull up a loop through just the chain. So we've got our two loops. We'll yarn over and steer that through the two loops. We'll find the next chain. So that's right here. Insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop back through the stitch, yarn over again, and pull through two loops. So insert the hook to slide the next stitch on, yarn over, pull up a loop back through the stitch, yarn over, and pull through two loops. Insert the hook, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through two loops. So if you want to count how many single crochet stitches you have, you can turn it so you're looking at the top edge, and again you should see that braid sort of structure, and just the same as with the chain stitch, each one of these V's is the top of one stitch. So far, if we start counting from this end up here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 single crochet stitches. Again, even if you have done it correctly, a lot of the times your very first single crochet might be at an angle where it'll be a little squash looking. But if you put your stitch marker in, you'll know for sure this was stitch number 1 or the beginning of the row. So I've got 3 chain stitches left, so I'll go ahead and finish those up. So again, I'm going to make sure that the working yarn is in front when I'm putting my hook back in. And then I'll insert the hook, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through two loops. And you can see that I'm not necessarily holding it so it's super perpendicular. If it's more comfortable, you can totally hold things so that the row itself is more at like a 45-degree angle. So you'll go into the next chain, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, and pull through two. And last one here, I'm gonna go into the chain, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, and pull through both. So this is my completed first row of single crochet stitches. And again, if I'm going to count them from this side here, this one that I have my stitch marker in, this is stitch number 1. There's the V. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 single crochet stitches. So that is our completed first row. So for our first row, we've started from the side we're holding the hook on and we've worked across. Our next row of stitches, we're going to work back this way, but because we don't want to be all twisted up like this, or we don't want to have to switch hands, we're going to turn our work or flip the row over. So for that, if you're holding it at the end, it would be like this. If you are going to turn your work from here, you can let go with the yarn tensioning hand, grab the far side of the row here, and then turn it over kind of like you're turning the page of a book. You want to make sure that your working yarn is out of the way, so that way when you flip your row over, this is not like wrapped around. So one more time, you've finished your row like this. If you've counted your stitches and you want to be extra sure you're doing everything right, you can place it down flat, pick up the far end from the hook, and flip it over, so bring it towards you and then move it to the other side, just like that. So now your hook is reset back onto the starting side, and you can work in the same direction for the next row. So you'll see now we're looking at the back side of our completed row, and it does look different. So there is a front side and a back side to single crochet stitch rows as well. So as you're crocheting it, the side that faces you, that's the front side of the row. Once you've flipped it over, you're looking at the back side of the row. So you can see that the front side of the row, kind of the middle part of it, you've got all the little V's here. On the back side of the row, you do still have the V's. They're kind of underneath these horizontal bumps here. So that's the back side, and you will notice that because the way the two loops sit on top of each other, the top one is not perfectly like flat on top. It rests kind of at an angle. Once we've turned our work, you can't see the top edge anymore. So because we want to see what we're doing, make sure that when you're holding the work for this row, you're holding it so that you can see this top edge here with the V's. So we're kind of looking at the top edge rather than the face here. So the way I'm holding it is with my thumb on this side with all the bumps, and then my middle finger is on top, and then the top edge is in the middle, and I'm turning it so I can see everything like that. So to start our new row, we need to make our turning chain. So just one regular chain stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So here, this one, which I made it a little bit big, but that's okay. That's going to be our turning chain. And this second stitch from the hook is where I'm going to attach my first single crochet stitch in this row. So for this one, I can keep going and attach it just to the back loop here. So same as if this was a chain, I'm going to insert my hook into the center of the V, slide it through. So go ahead and retension your yarn. Again, make sure that it wasn't wrapped up in front like this. When you're starting, you want that working yarn to sort of be away from you. Find 1, 2, the second stitch from the hook. Insert the hook into the middle so that the back half of the V is on the hook. And we'll do the same set of steps as we did before to make that single crochet stitch. So we'll yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over again, and pull that through 2 loops. So now here we have our first completed single crochet in this row. So this little loop right here, that was our turning chain. So if you're using those stitch markers, go ahead and put that one in. So what we're doing is we're putting a stitch marker into the top of the first completed stitch of our row. So if you find your working loop, it should be sprouting out from a V. So that is what we're going to put our stitch marker into. And I try to get both halves of that V on so it looks like this. And then go ahead and close that up. So now we've got 2. And let's keep going. So I'll reposition everything. I'm making sure that I can see this top edge, so it makes it easier to find the next stitch. So all the stuff here we've just finished, it's attached to this guy. So the next stitch is this one right here. Or again, if you're kind of starting from the cleaner side, we have a V, we have a V, that's also a V. And then after that, there's kind of a V, but there's stuff in it. So this one's done. This is where we're going to put the hook. So go ahead, find the stitch, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops. Let's find our next one. So here, the next stitch is right here. Because remember, we have for each single crochet stitch, there's kind of the top and the side. The side is always going to be grabbing onto that previous row or whatever your attachment point was. So even if you've got like maybe a bit of a gap under there, which is pretty normal when you're starting out and you're pulling a little bit too much, you want to make sure you don't go in there and that you go into the next empty stitch. So here, let's do just that. Go in, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. Let's find our next stitch. So that'll be right here. Insert the hook, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Find the next one. So if we're looking here, our next stitch is right here. We'll go in, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And we'll do that going all the way to the end. And again, on that note of if you've got a big gap, usually what causes that is when you're doing that pull through 2 loop step, if you're kind of lifting and like pulling back a lot like this, so maybe you're having a hard time going through and you're kind of, you're like wrestling with it. You can see as I'm doing that, I'm not actually making these loops much bigger. Instead, what's happening is that attachment point loop is getting all stretched out. So if yours looks kind of gappy, just double check that you're not pulling super hard there. If you're having trouble on that pull through 2, what I recommend doing is first, if they got all choked up here, go ahead and kind of wiggle them on the stem to loosen them up lightly. And you really want to think of that pull through as more of a steering motion rather than a yanking motion. And try not to twist the hook too much in any direction, because as you're twisting, what happens is you're tightening the base of the loops up, and that will make it harder to pull through. When you're pulling through, try to keep the hook straight, move really gently. Make sure that you're not pinched down on this. You do always want to be able to slide the new working yarn over. So you'll do your yarn over. Don't forget to twist the hook so that the head is pointing towards the bottom of the loops that you're going through. And then try to aim it so that this pointy part of the hook is in the middle or towards the bottom of the loops as you're going through. So you're going to clear that first one, keep going through the second one, and try not to lift your hook too far away from that previous row, because again, all that pulling and yanking is what's going to cause gaps. So I'm going to redo probably those 2 stitches there, and let's finish up this row. So into the next stitch, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over again, and pull or steer or scoop through both of those loops. And every time you're finished making a stitch, you want to make sure that you've got just 1 loop on your hook. If you have 2 loops on your hook, sometimes what happened was when you were pulling through the 2, this one gets caught up with the new yarn. So if you pull through like that and it kind of catches and you come up like this and you've got 2 on the hook, to fix that, just take your hook out and then just slowly pull on that working yarn until the funky one comes out, and just try it again. So insert the hook, yarn over to pull up a loop, and then when you're going through, try to keep that little bit of space that's naturally there between them. Try not to organize it so that it's all crunching up together, and twist the hook down and scoop through both. So I've got 3 more left here, so I'll insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a new loop, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops. So here I've reached the end of the row, and I have that stitch marker that we put in way back when. So that'll tell me this is where I should be placing the last stitch in this row. So I usually like to take it out first. If you have enough room, you can leave it in, but you do want to take the stitch marker out once you're done making this stitch. So I'm gonna slide that out and do my last stitch. So go into the center of the V, yarn over, pull up that second loop, yarn over, and join the 2 loops together. So that is row 2 completed. So it should look something like this. You'll have a ridge here of all the front half of the stitch that you didn't slide onto the hook. So what we just did here was we worked the single crochet stitch into the back loops only of the previous row. So if you wanted to keep going there, from here on out, just repeat the same thing. Once you've reached the end of the row, you'll want to double check that you have the right number just to make sure you didn't accidentally skip a stitch or accidentally add an extra one in. So for that, you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you have fewer than 10, or if you're consistently losing a stitch, what happens is you're going to end up with a triangle. If you're consistently adding a stitch accidentally, your piece is going to get wider and wider. So if you do find that you don't have the right number of stitches, what you'll need to do is just slowly pull out that row until either you find like, oh, another one will pop out and you're like, that's the one I missed. And then you can put that missing stitch back in and finish your row. Or if you pull and pull and pull and say you found that there were 2 stitches here, and then you are pulling out and you see that the next one was still attached to the same loop, then you can say, oh, that's where I accidentally added an extra one, and continue from there. Or you can just pull the whole row out and start over and make sure that you have the right number. So counting is going to be a pretty big part of your crochet experience. You don't have to count every time, and not in the same way that you have to drink water. But if you're not counting every row, if you do notice after a while that you've somehow added like a few stitches or lost a few stitches, you may just end up needing to pull back more than one row in order to find and fix your mistake. So, that's all. Count more frequently if you want to have to potentially redo fewer stitches. I'll go ahead and do one more row of single crochet stitches. I'll talk through it, but I won't pause quite so much. So here, let's pick up at the end of our completed row. We'll move the working yarn so it's out of the way. Grab the far end of our completed row, bring it towards us, turn it like we're turning a page, so that way our hook is back on the original side. Pick up your yarn to retension it. Find a comfortable way to hold the work so that you're able to see the top edge of the previous row, since that's what we're working into. And to start our row, we'll do our turning chain. So 1 extra chain stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then our first single crochet stitch, we're going to skip 1, so skip the chain, and we're going to go into here. So I'll insert my hook into that second stitch from the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And that's my first completed stitch in the row. So I'll go ahead and pick up the stitch marker I removed from the last row. I'm going to find the top of the completed stitch. So that's where the working loop is sprouting out from, and slide that stitch marker in. So it looks like that. Oops, I think I accidentally split it. Let's try one more time. There we go. So it should look like this. And I'll close that up so it'll help me remember where the first stitch was. So from here, let's find the next one. So no more skipping since we're past that turning chain. We'll go into here, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Find the next stitch, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert into the next, yarn over, pull up that second loop, yarn over, pull through the 2 to join them. Find the next stitch, insert the hook, yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, join the 2 loops. Insert the hook under the next anchor point, yarn over, pull up a loop, so you've got 2 loops, yarn over, pull through both. Insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull up a loop by going through both. So almost at the end. So when you're going a little smoother, it'll look like this. So we've got to the end of our row. So we're at that stitch that has the stitch marker in it. So I'm gonna slide that out and make the last stitch here. Yarn over, pull up that second loop, yarn over, pull through both of them to join. So that is a 3rd row of single crochet stitches, and I've worked all of these through the back loops only. On that note, you might guess that you can attach your single crochet stitches to the back half of the V. You can also attach them just to the front half. So if you're going to attach them to the front half, you want to slide that part of the V onto the hook. So for that, because we don't want to stab towards ourselves, we're stabbing away from ourselves. For that first one there, I'm going to come in from the front side, pop this hook right out the middle so that that half of the V is on the hook, but everything else will be exactly the same. So yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. That's our first completed stitch in the row. So if you're using these to help count, go ahead and put that stitch marker in. And then if I'm going forward, going just into the front loops, I'm going to come in from the side, slide just this half onto the hook. So into the side, out the middle, and everything else is the same. Yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, find the next one, but instead of going into the center and out the back, we're going to come in from the front, slide the other half of the V on like this, and then attach our single crochet stitch there. So if you work that way, that's called working your single crochet stitches into the front loops only. And the single crochet stitch is a kind of separate design choice that you would make as from where you're attaching them. So you could have a fabric that's made up of rows of single crochet stitches in the back loops only, or a fabric that's made up of single crochet stitches attached to the front loops only, or even a combination. But the attachment point is kind of a separate decision from what stitch you are making. So there's another row, just kind of real quick there. So all still single crochet stitches. I've just attached them to the other half of the stitch in the row below. And there's a third option. So if I do my next row that way, turn it over, and even though, I've attached it at a different point, so you can see there's the unworked row here, the actual stitches themselves, it's still those two loops that are joined together. So here I have already made my turning chain. So for this next row, our third option, instead of going through just the back or just the front, you can also attach your stitch so that the whole V is the attachment point. So when you do that, that's called working your stitch into both loops. So what that would look like for a single crochet stitch is you'll start like you're going into the front loops only. So go under that first one that's closer to you, or the first side of the V. Keep going so you've slid both arms on. And then now when you do that first pull through the stitch step, you just want to make sure to clear both of those. And once you're here, that should look nice and familiar. And you can finish up your stitch by doing that yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So again, first completed stitch in the row. So I'll move my stitch marker into there and close that up. And if I'm going to work this row into both loops, so I still want to hold it so I can see where I'm inserting the hook, but instead of going just into the back or just into the front, I'm sliding both arms of that stitch onto the hook. So when I do my yarn over, pull through the stitch, I'm going through both of them. So I've got my 2 new loops here. Then I'll yarn over and pull through both. So that's the single crochet stitch still. We're just attaching it now to both loops of the previous stitch. So it will look like this. Find the next V, slide the whole thing onto the hook, yarn over, pull back through the whole stitch so you've got your 2 loops, and join those 2 loops together. So again, same thing, it's still a single crochet stitch. I'm just attaching it in a slightly different way. And if you're following a pattern, it might tell you, okay, for this scarf, we're going to be working our stitches in the back loops only or the front loops only. But if it doesn't specify which one to go into, the default is actually to work into both loops. So what I'm doing here, where I slide the whole top of the stitch onto the hook. Like that, and we've reached the end with our stitch marker here. I'll pop that out and make my last stitch right here. So that was 1 row of single crochet stitches, and they were worked into both loops of the previous row. So kind of 3 different options there on how you can create a fabric using that single crochet stitch. And to show some examples of what those different finished fabrics will look like, if you continue working so that every stitch in every row is a single crochet stitch attached to the back loops only, you'll end up with this kind of ridged accordion looking fabric. It'll be pretty stretchy. If you work into the front loops only, so single crochet stitch into the front loops, you'll end up with a fabric that looks like this. So both of these are the same number of rows tall, same number of stitches across, and you'll see that the front loops only version is a little bit flatter and taller versus this because it's not kind of yoinked together. This is also single crochet stitch. And if we go into both loops, so again, kind of that default or classic mode, if you will, you end up with a fabric that looks like this. So this is single crochet stitch into both loops. And if you make a little practice swatch, one of each, you'll notice that the single crochet stitch, when you're attaching it to both loops, is a little bit more structured than these other two, which makes sense because you have 2 anchor points instead of just one. So a lot of projects like baskets or bucket hats or stuffed toys that are 3D will use single crochet stitch through both loops because it's a little bit more structured and sturdy. If you want to create a fabric that maybe has a little bit more drape and you don't want to use a particularly large hook for the yarn you have, you can do single crochet stitch into just the back loops, this one, or just the front loops. But all cool fabrics, just depends what qualities you want your fabric to have for the project you're making. And again, this one here is the back loops only, front loops only, and this is going through both loops. So that was the chain stitch and then the single crochet stitch with 3 variations, changing up how we attach it. Before we wrap up, I'm going to show you how to add more yarn into a project. So this is either you've run out of your current ball or maybe you want to change colors. So for that, I'll start working a new row here. I'll do single crochet stitch into both loops. So I'm skipping my turning chain. Let's do a few stitches here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at this point, say I'm about to run out. So I've cut the yarn that I was working with. When you're about to run out, you want to make sure you're going to leave a couple inches at least of tail so that at the end of your project, when you're going back to clean things up, there's enough that you can thread it through a tapestry needle to actually tuck it in. So when you've got a couple inches left, this will be the last stitch in this old yarn. Go ahead and start making the stitch. So in this case, single crochet, I'm going to insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. And when you're on that last step, so in this case, that would have been to yarn over, pull through 2 loops. All you need to do is drop the old yarn, grab your new yarn, and complete the stitch with that. So you can tension the yarn the same way. This can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but you can always tighten it afterwards. So what I'm doing here is I'm sort of pinching that tail on the back side so it doesn't fly away. And then I'll do that last step. I'll yarn over and pull through 2 loops with the new yarn. So if it's a little bit loose like that, what you can do is just sort of tug on the tails to make it more snug. And you can do that afterwards too if it gets a little bit loose as you're crocheting. So now I've got my new yarn attached and I'll just keep working with that, and I will ignore the tail of the yarn, which is now towards the back. And when I go to clean everything up at the end, so in the ends, I'll just tuck those in. So you don't need to tie any knots when you're adding new yarn. And if you're changing colors, say you wanted to do stripes and you're here at the end, you want to do this at the end of the row, so as you're finishing, not as you're starting the new row if you want kind of the edges color change to be clean. But it would be the same thing. You'll cut your old color, and then the last step, so that yarn over, pull through 2, you would just pick up your new color and start working with that, just like nothing happened. So if we're here and now we want to kind of finish off our piece, what I like to do is I'll add 1 extra chain stitch here at the very end, and I'll show you why in a second. And then if I've got extra yarn, I'll go ahead and cut it. Again, I'm going to leave a few inches of extra tail. And to finish off, just pull up the working loops. So keep going until the tail comes through. So at this point, if you tighten this up, it won't unravel anymore. And I'll usually go ahead and sort of smush down that extra chain stitch that I did, so it's a little bit neat there at the corner. If you didn't add that extra chain, what happens is if you're tightening this up, or maybe you're using your finished object, that last stitch will get a little bit misshapen, and I just think this looks a little bit nicer. So at this point, we've got a little rectangle, and there's a bunch of tails hanging out. So to clean this up, I'm going to kind of just tuck them into the sides using a tapestry needle. So this tapestry needle right here, it's the bent tip type. Generally, what makes a tapestry needle different from just your regular sewing needle is that the end is blunt, so you're going to be less likely to split the yarn as you're working with it. So to finish things off, go ahead and thread one of those tails into the tapestry needle. And if your project has kind of like an outside and an inside, or we might hear like the right side out and then, the other side, you'll want to do all this weaving in on the side that's going to be hidden. If you're doing something like a scarf where both sides might be showing, you can keep all of this more towards the edges or just try to be extra neat about it. But if we pretend that this side here that I'm looking at is kind of going to be the hidden side of my fabric, I will go ahead and just start tucking this bit of tail in. So what I do is I'll pick any loop here that's kind of one away from where the yarn currently is. So here, this is one away, and I'll just thread the tail through that. And then I'll just pick a direction. So maybe let's go this way. You can go straight, you can go down. Just kind of pick one direction and go with it. And let's see, this is another loop that's pretty close. So I'll go through that, pull the tail through. Let's see, another one that's close by, this one right here. I'll thread it through there. Doesn't really matter too much which particular direction you go. You just want to make sure you're not going in and making a big stitch by putting the needle in far away, like here, because then what's going to happen is your stitch will be more visible and also more likely to snag. So just keep everything nice and close together. So for most yarns, you're probably good if you do like 4 or 5 stitches in your first direction. So I think I've done 3. Let's do a couple more. So I'll go through this loop here, pull through, and then one more. Let's go down here. So I've done a couple of stitches in one direction. So now I'll kind of zhuzh this, flatten it out to make sure it hasn't been like scrunched up like this. So flatten it out and then just pick any other direction and then do a couple more stitches in that new direction. Having the yarn tucked in 2 different angles, I find tends to make things less likely to wiggle out. So let's go up here in that direction. So that's pretty close. I'll just go with that. So 1, 2, or you can be a little bit more chaotic, go in another direction again. But basically you're just doing one little stitch at a time to tuck those ends in. And if you are doing a project like a scarf where both sides are going to be visible, this might look a little neater if you finish your weaving in so that you end on an edge. But here, if I say, all right, I think this is good enough, I'm going to cut my yarn here. I'll do my last stitch, pull that through. Again, kind of see if I can flatten everything out, make sure it looks relatively neat. And then I'll cut off the extra tail. I usually like to leave a centimeter or so, just because after you wash it for the first time or you start using the thing, it might kind of settle. And later on, if it's still poking out, then you can always go back and trim it some more. So just take your scissors and then cut, leaving a little bit extra. So that's how you would hide one tail. And you want to go back and do that to all the little bits that are left over here. And then once you're done with that, you'll have a neat finished project. So that was Crochet 101, how to do the chain stitch and the single crochet stitch. I hope that was helpful. Single crochet stitch, again, great for lots of things. If you change up which way you're attaching it, what yarn you're using, what hook size you're using, you can make all sorts of stuff. Again, single crochet stitch, it's used for a lot of these cute little stuffed toys, amigurumi. This guy is the Triceratops from the free Club Crochet tutorial video. I've added a little party hat. It's also used a lot for ribbing. So this is the back loop only. You can see on this little fingerless glove here, the base is made out of single crochet stitches. It's also really good for beanies. So let me back out here a little bit, but this is made up of single crochet stitches. There's a little bit of shaping at the top, so it's not exactly a rectangle, but the whole thing pretty much just single crochet stitches. If you wanted to do a simple first project, I'll have some links to some videos that I like that use just a single crochet stitch. You could do a scarf, you know, if you just make your swatch and then keep going until it's the length that you want if you're going this way. You could make some coasters, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like if you found it useful or entertaining, and I'll see you in the next one.